On June 30th, an Israeli jet dropped a 500-pound bomb on a cafe in northern Gaza. The cafe was filled with dozens of people. Over 40 people were killed and over 70 were injured. Israel stated that it was targeting Hamas members who were at the cafe. During war, civilian casualties are inevitable. This, however, does not mean that militaries have a blank check to kill civilians. The only circumstances where one could even begin to attempt to justify the deaths of civilians is when those deaths are unavoidable and the result of a necessary military action. In Israel's attack on the cafe, it claimed that it targeted 3 Hamas members. Initially, they claimed only that they had targeted terrorists, but several days later, after facing criticism for the strike, they provided more detail, stating that their main target was the commander of Hamas's navy. This was meant to show the significance of the target, and therefore justify the deaths of the civilians that were killed. Taking a closer look at this, however, makes the opposite point. Hamas obviously has no navy, certainly not after almost 2 years of Israel's assault on Gaza. Also, the target was said to be the 4th commander of Hamas's navy since the war started. The others were also killed. Was this really such a high-priority target that it was worth killing dozens of innocent civilians, many of them children? Whether the person who was targeted was actually the commander of the navy, or that title was simply given to him after the fact by Israel, is also something worth considering. The cost of this strike, to kill the commander of Hamas's navy, was around 40 innocent civilians killed and over 70 injured. Many of those who were injured lost limbs or were severely burnt. A number of those who were harmed in this attack were young students who went to the cafe to study, as it was one of the few places with stable internet. A 4-year-old child was killed, along with several other children and teenagers. 6 cafe waiters were killed, as were several artists, athletes, and at least 1 journalist. None of this is unexpected, given that this was a strike on a crowded civilian location. Israel claimed that it took efforts to minimize civilian casualties, yet even with these efforts, there was still an incredibly high civilian death toll. One of the ways that Israel said it tried to limit casualties was through aerial surveillance. This means that Israel likely had drones observing the cafe and knew very well that there were dozens of children, women, and other innocent people there, and yet they still decided to drop a 500-pound bomb. This brings us to another important point. Israel has one of the most technologically advanced militaries in the world. They have a variety of options for going after their targets. They have many smaller and more precise munitions than a 500-pound bomb. They also have soldiers on the ground and snipers, and they have armed drones that can fire at a single target. Israel absolutely had the capability to kill their target and only their target. They chose not to do this. This is part of a pattern repeated over and over again of Israel having no regard whatsoever for civilian deaths. They regularly bomb apartment buildings filled with families, presumably targeting an individual or a few individuals who they suspect are associated with Hamas. There have now been countless instances of Israel bombing schools that were turned into refugee centers, which were housing dozens of families. They have been bombing constantly for nearly 2 years at this point. They have certainly taken out basically all targets of any real significance, yet still on a daily basis they continue with strikes that kill dozens of innocent civilians at a time. This is in contrast to guidelines used by the U.S. in its operations in the Middle East, where even for a very high-level target, a strike could only be authorized if civilian casualties were expected to be fewer than 30, and even then, this was only allowed under extreme circumstances. The attitude driving Israel's total disregard for civilian life comes from a common belief among Israelis that all Palestinians bear collective guilt. many Israeli leaders have made statements to the effect that there are no uninvolved civilians, that all civilians are responsible for Hamas's attack on Israel. One former member of Israel's parliament stated that every child, every baby in Gaza is the enemy. This thinking is widespread among Israelis and drives Israel's choices around targeting that have led to a maximization of civilian casualties. They target anything and everything, regardless of if those targets are actually important or actually pose any threat to Israel, and regardless of the civilians that are killed as a result. Beyond reckless bombings that kill countless civilians, Israeli attitudes towards Palestinians also drive the countless direct killings of civilians that have taken place. In a recent whistleblower interview, an Israeli soldier described how commanders regularly order soldiers to fire on unarmed civilians for no reason, even when it was clear that they posed no threat. These arbitrary killings of civilians have been taking place throughout the conflict, and the Israeli government has done nothing to stop them. Over the past few weeks, since Israel opened its aid distribution centers, over 500 civilians have been killed while trying to get aid. Numerous reports from people on the ground and videos make it clear that soldiers have been randomly firing on people seeking aid. Israel's actions in Gaza are meant to maximize death, destruction, and civilian collateral damage in order to fulfill Israel's goal of ethnic cleansing. The key members of Netanyahu's coalition have made it clear that their goal is to expel all Palestinians from Gaza, and they have made it clear that they will abandon Netanyahu if the war ends, which would put an end to their plans. Israel could negotiate a peace agreement and get its hostages back, but it has chosen not to do this because it wants the war to continue so that it can continue to pressure the population of Gaza. In Netanyahu's recent meeting with Trump, he spoke about how he hoped that Gazans would freely choose to leave Gaza for other countries. The plan is that after intentionally depriving Gazans of food, after bombing and killing them day after day for months on end, they will choose to leave if given the option. This genocidal plan is plain to see. Anyone who is honest and has a conscience has to oppose this. We have to do everything we can to stop these genocidal acts.